With that
being said, we'll move on to our Seattle Kraken, who have hit some bumps in the road here. They played against the Nashville Predators on the 8th and won 5-1. Very dominant win. Player of the game 1 is Andrei Burakovsky with 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points, a 2+-. And our second player of the game was Jordan Eberle with 2 goals, 2 points, a 2+-, 1 takeaway. And then the rough patch started on November 11th versus the Minnesota Wild. They got shut out. They lost 1-0. On the 13th, yesterday, versus the Winnipeg Jets in their retro jerseys, they lost 3-2. Our player of the game there is Brandon Tanev with 1 goal, 1 point, a 1+-, 2 shots, 3 hits, 1 block, and 1 takeaway. Now, normally you don't do players of the game when we have a loss, but how can you not when Brandon looked like he was all across the board there?
Yeah, I mean, you just kept looking down the stat sheet, and I kept saying shots, hits, block, takeaway. That to look over those past 2 games, that one against Nashville put your win streak to 5, first time in franchise history. You play a Minnesota team that you would shut out on the road the past week, and they shut you out 1-0. They're a good team. They're hard. They're physical. They're big. And they beat you 1-0, which is, it's fine. But, you'd hope to rebound from that. You weren't able to get inside much. They made it really hard to get shots on goal. And so the 13th against Winnipeg in their reverse retro jerseys, they looked a little bit better on offense. They just got some unlucky bounces. Brandon Tanev hit the post. Jared McCann hit the post and had a couple near misses. And then there was the end of the game. Seattle was leading 2-1 they had about 30 seconds left, and Pierre-Luc Dubois kind of goaded Carson Soucy into a penalty. But when you look at it, it's not to bring up bad memories, but a few weeks ago when the Bills and Packers were playing on primetime, someone did something, and the Packers guy got flagged, and you can see Matt LaFleur say they always get the second guy, and they always do, because Pierre-Luc Dubois kind of jostled with Carson Soucy. Dubois turns around, and Soucy punches him in the back of the head.
Yeah, okay. Now I understand why people were upset, though, because people were upset that Soucy took the bait there.
Yeah, and I saw some like, well, that was interesting with Coach Dave Haxall after the game, because he said, from what my understanding was, he was confused. He said, my understanding was that both guys were going to the box, which changes things, because, with giving them a power play with a few seconds left, they go up the man advantage. If you take both guys off the ice, there's no advantage. It's just fewer guys on the ice.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. But at the end of the day, you can't retaliate. My dad's always told me that, whenever, like a Seahawk would get a flag when I was watching football early on, or that thing with the floor, they always get the second guy. They do, which is unfortunate, but it's just how it happened. And you can't give up that penalty in the game. You gave up 8 total penalties in that game. You spent nearly 20 minutes in the penalty box. It can't happen.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, that just can't happen. So frustrating for sure. They're 2 close ones, but definitely frustrating. And, you're halfway through your 6-game homestand. You're still 3rd in the division, but you're starting to lose ground here.
Right.
So
it's always a little tough to pick players of the week when there are more losses than wins. But you went with Martin Jones.
Yeah, we went with our we did it a few weeks ago. The 2 players who recently became new fathers. I think Jordan already has kids, but Martin became a new dad. I went with Martin Jones, and this isn't over the last week necessarily, but just to look at the sort of run that he's been on, as you can see the photo there in the reverse retro, since the 25th of October, is a 5-win, 2-loss, 1 overtime loss record with a .936 save percentage, was its 5th best in the NHL, a 5.8 goals saved above expected, which is 5th in the NHL, and a 1.64 goal allowed on average, which is 1st in the NHL. in that span, which is, now a few weeks.
Right.
This was a guy that, Martin Jones. I sound like Chris Collinsworth. This is a guy. Yeah. He came over he played with Philadelphia. He's been a long time San Jose Shark. My buddy RJ with Emerald City Hockey is kind of when we signed him, when we were all at media during free agency, he kind of goes, unsure about him. He's really played really well. And, when when Philip Grubauer comes back from injury, you'll be able to give him some rest. I'm not starting any controversy. I think that's ridiculous. There have been a lot of guys who have been given a second chance. Will Borgen had a bad year last year. He's been playing a lot better this year. There have been a bunch of guys who the fan base, I believe, is really given a second chance. You have to be able to do that for Philip Grubauer. He's been it's funny with Martin Jones now playing in goal, because a lot of the times now, if a bad goal happens, the fans are realizing, it's the defense that's giving this up. But whenever we post whenever I'm at morning skate and Grubauer's on the ice, it's not a good sign. I'm like, come on, man. You got to be able. What is this gripe?
Yeah.
And when I get sort of more casual fans that talk to me about the Kraken, they go, that goalkeeper sucks. I'm like, no, you got to watch the games, dude. You got to watch the games. Because if I had a whiteboard and I sit here, or one of those video boards, when we break down the play and I can circle the guy, I'm like, look at this turnover. That's the only reason. You free up a guy, you give the puck back right in front of your goal, stuff like that. I know that there are some where, yes, Gruby is a mistake, but that's with goalkeeping, whether it's in hockey or in soccer, you're going to give up goals at some point. It's going to happen. Sometimes they just beat you. It's the guys, like with the goals saved above expected, for Martin Jones, it's not being able to put your goalkeepers in those bad positions more than they need to be. So I wish people would give Gruby more of some leeway and some respect here, because it's just disappointing. You don't want to see guys, who are trying to work back from injury, people saying, oh, great, and they're just making bad comments. It's just ridiculous. I just think it's ridiculous. So,
well, fatherhood looks good on Martin Jones on the ice right now. Like you said, he's doing really well. This is his second week on our Players of the Week list. So, I went with, I know I always reward consistency, so that's very on par here. Jordan Eberle, who had 3 goals and 3 points in those 3 games. So that was,
hard to argue with.
Yeah, that was my thought process there. Is he scored on both games? So
Eberle was a guy that early in the season, I said it again, that I was waiting for some of that production, and he's looked a lot like this past game when he scored. I'm like, all right, and then he had some plays afterwards, like in the next few shifts. I was like, all right, this guy's ready to go.
Yeah.
So he's looking better. He's one of the more veteran guys on this team, part of that leadership group, and he's been playing like it. So that's good to see as well.
That wraps up our Players of the Week. So we'll move on to some injury news here. And as you've mentioned, we have news on Philip Grubauer. He was on the ice for optional morning skate
on the 8th, as well as this past game. So he's been there. This last game, he was actually doing exercises for the first time that I've seen. The 8th there, he was on the ice, but when I arrived for morning skate, he was probably just wrapping up which is interesting. I'm like, oh man, I wanted to see what was going on. He did some actual goalie practice this past week, but the last a few days ago, he was actually put on long-term IR, which is interesting because IR in hockey is different. You think about IR in the NFL, it's like you're losing this guy for half
weeks,
the season.
Yeah,
a good amount of time. Here, this was more of a cap space move because they have Jonas Donskoy on IR, Chris Drieger on IR, and now Grubauer. That's a lot of money on IR. Those are just like starting caliber guys.
Right.
So I believe this was just a cap space move, but it seems like he's starting to get back to some point. Martin Jones is holding down the fort right now, but you don't want to overwork a goalkeeper like Grubauer was last year. You don't want to just, it's every night Jones is getting out there. But so some positive news. I don't care what people say on that regard. Good to see that. This next one was not as positive. You lose a guy this is a tough loss, and I don't know how long he'll be out.
Yeah. Jamie Oleksiak has sustained a lower body injury and will miss the game versus the Wild.
Not been back.
Did miss the game versus the Wild. He suffered the injury against the Predators. Oh, and there's no report on. Yeah.
Didn't see him for morning skate. He got placed on IR later in the day. It was interesting against the Predators because he didn't play the entire third period, and we heard lower body, and
That's all we get.
With hockey.
Yeah.
He's a guy that, I did it again. He's able to be a big presence on the defensive end of the things. He's a veteran guy, and he's able to move the puck up the ice too. With some of the people that we've had taking his spot in the roster, they haven't. Cale Fleury did some solid stuff. Kostov Olofsson, who played last night, was the word the kids use is mid. But they don't bring that puck up the ice. They don't add that offensive attack. I talk about putting shots on net. Without Alexiak, you haven't. He adds that. He continues to add that from the defensive side of things as well on that second defensive line. So, and it's a tough loss, and we have no idea. And I don't know what the extent of that is, which is unfortunate.
Updates will be reported as we receive them. We'll move on to some team news here. On November 10th, the team claimed Magnus Hellberg off of waivers. They also recalled defenseman Gustav Olofsson from the Coachella Valley and reassigned goaltender Joey Decord to the Coachella Valley. Any thoughts on those moves?
I don't know if you remember Hellberg, but he had the really cool pads. And so he gets brought back because Ottawa placed him on waivers. They did this move so Decord could go back to Coachella and sort of keep him down there because they don't want to put him on waivers and expose him to potentially being picked up. They want to keep Joey around is the point. And so they've got more of a veteran backup now for Jones and Hellberg and someone who spent time here in the preseason. Olofsson only came up because of Alexiak on IR. So Hellberg's a cool guy. Seeing him in practice lately and seeing him in the locker room yesterday, he was talking with a few members of the media saying that when he left Seattle, there were guys online saying, "Hey, can I get your pads?" He gets to use them again, which is cool. But
so he didn't give them away.
They were back out there. But it was funny that someone was saying that when we play Ottawa, that he should wear one pad Seattle and one pair Ottawa.
That would be
at least during morning skate.
Yeah,
it's funny. Some of the equipment in this game is really cool. So
we'll make sure to get a picture of that if that's actually seen at morning skate. I'll do my best. We'll move on to some league news here. On the 10th, PK Subban is headed to ESPN. Longtime NHL defenseman, Norris Cup winner PK Subban is joining the network as an analyst. On the 11th, it was reported that the World Cup of Hockey is postponed. The NHL union announced that the international tournament scheduled for February will be delayed for at least 1 year. On the 12th, the NFLPA called out for turf change.
Oops.
That's in the wrong section.
Oops.
But do you want to go over that?
Sure. I mean, that just goes back to what we were talking about with, player safety. That's on me. I put that in the wrong I was like, wait a minute. What are you saying? That's on me. But yeah, players
anyway,
president JC Treader
rolling off my mouth.
wants NFL to ban slit film turf to increase player safety. Someone made a comment the other day. I heard. I was actually yesterday at the Armory before the Kraken game. Phil Dixon, he works with the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. You can see where this is transcending from baseball to football,
hockey, football, baseball.
Yeah, but with the turf and the grass.
Yeah.
He said he heard from a player, if a horse can't eat it, I don't want to play on it, which is interesting. Turf, with all these injuries, with the Seahawks going to LA playing at SoFi Stadium, some of the players going to the Rams, I've seen a lot of. This has happened over the course of years too. Joey Bosa, I believe, last year, a few years ago, same thing. Nick Bosa, with the Niners. Yeah. So this is a consistent thing. Pete Carroll talked about it a few weeks ago with the Seahawks and Lumen Field, which will be big because they'll have to do so for the World Cup anyway when they host it in 2026. But yeah, really, really interesting to see this. But to look at some of the hockey news, Subban, that's really great to see. With I talked about it with Everett Fitzhugh on our interview here in the Black Media Matters studio. Having so limited Black presence in hockey, having Subban as an analyst is great. It's great to see, have his face on TV. I talked with this with Council President Juarez yesterday when we talked about, Indigenous people in hockey and, having Jackie McCormick honored. Representation is big everywhere because if I see a player on the ice in hockey, but that's great. But if I don't go pro, knowing that there are people in different aspects of these sports, like with Subban as an analyst now, front office, different stuff like that. Representation matters all the time.
It does.
And that's that there. World Cup of Hockey, Come on.
A year?
Yeah. That's unfortunate. That's just unfortunate.
That's a long time. Yeah. We'll get back to our Kraken here. They have a 8-5-3 record. They're third in the Pacific and have 19 points currently in the season. Looking ahead, they will face the New York Rangers on the 17th. That's a 7 p.m. puck drop. And then on the 19th versus the LA Kings, also a 7 p.m. puck drop.